I don't like limited mobility. Okay, well, I'm losing my voice, so it probably helps if I use the microphone anyways. Good morning, everybody. My name is Raphael Mudge. I go by Armitage Hacker on Twitter. Real quick, what I'd like to do before diving into the content of this talk and what it's about, I just want to get a feel for you just so I know how much background to give. How many of you know what Armitage is? Most of you. Okay, great. How many of you have used it before? Okay, fantastic. Well, that makes it a lot easier. I see a few of you don't, so that's cool. Don't worry. I'll make sure you're taken care of too. One thing I like to do when I'm giving a talk to a really cool conference like Bsides Vegas or DerbyCon, I like that one a lot too, I like to give out stickers. So I've got some Armitage stickers up here. I'm going to just take one, pass it around. Everybody loves stickers. Mr. Sokol. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into this talk. I've been working on Armitage now for about coming up 2 years, okay? And something I've never done is, I've done this in bits and pieces, but I've never actually gotten up in front of an audience and said, here's the crackpot thing I think I'm trying to achieve, okay? And I've never gotten up in front of an audience and said, on top of what I'm trying to achieve, what I've done and what I'm going to do next. And I've always been afraid to do that because I don't want to promise something and not be able to deliver it. But it's just my personality. But I really feel like it's time to start sharing where I want things to go and what I'm trying to do, and invite your ideas and feedback into that process. So what we're going to talk about today is force multipliers for red team operations. Don't worry, if you don't know what a force multiplier is, I'm going to explain that. So there will be a little bit of military jargon in this talk, but I will define all of it. And what I'm interested in is how a team of hackers works together, okay? And I've been interested in this problem since I used to work as a researcher for the Air Force. And I've been interested in this problem since 2006. You can't see it very well, but in the background here is a picture of a bunch of guys in uniform, cadets, in an event from 2007, playing a war game where they were actually trying to conduct the cyber part of a simulated kinetic war. And I wrote a public paper on this exercise, and the photos from the public paper, so I can talk about it. But what I noticed during the event was that military-style command and control never evolved in this team of hackers. Okay, you never had people actually taking orders, taking a role, taking a job, and supporting each other as a team. And from that time, I had this inkling that there was a problem there waiting to be explored, waiting to be solved. I just didn't know what it was until later, and we're going to talk about that. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to introduce myself and introduce kind of the problem statement a little bit further. And we're going to talk about force multipliers and what I mean by that phrase. Really, it's just jargon for synergy, which itself is jargon for things that work really well together. But we're going to talk about what force multipliers are for a team of hackers. And then I'm going to take this problem and I'm going to scope it, okay? Because one thing I learned as a researcher is I can never solve a problem for every possible use case in every possible way. So what we do in the research world is we define our problem, scope it to where we're going to solve it there, and then use those lessons learned to expand out. So we're going to scope this problem of how red teams can work together, and then we're going to talk about 3 force multipliers, collaboration, distribution, and automation. Strangely enough, they're the things I've either worked on, am working on, or will work on soon. So it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just how I see the world right now. And we'll go from there. It's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of stories. Just a little bit about me. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran, so I was active duty. As I mentioned, I worked as a security researcher at that time. So if I use the word cyber a lot, that's why. But I was just a crackpot academic, just a person meant to sit in an ivory tower and do whatever people do there. I have participated on a number of red teams since 2008, so I've had a lot chance to learn from some of the best. Been a lot of fun. So you'll see some of that coming through in this talk. I have worked as a penetration tester on on a DoD type red team, so did the kind of longer term stuff as well. Really like doing that kind of work. But what I primarily love doing is I'm a developer. I write code. And with that, I actually started a company this year, Strategic Cyber, and I make software for red teams. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to advancedpentest.com or get a comic from me afterwards. But that's about all you'll hear about that in this talk. So the question, how do we organize a red team? Okay, that's a problem I'm interested in. And what I've got here is a picture of the Small Unit Tactics Manual. This is a book. It's like a football playbook for the Army, if anybody's ever read it. It's got pictures of, here's where I put these Army guys, here's how their fire covers each other, and how a platoon can support each other based on different kinds of objectives you might have in a battlefield situation. What does that look like if somebody were to write this book for our field, for what we do? Okay? I think that's a really interesting question. I haven't seen one. If anybody else has, let me know. I'd love to read it. One that's written by somebody who does it, though, not a bureaucrat. But my perspective isn't even in answering that particular question. My interest is in the tools that we're using and how they prevent us from answering this question and how they can better help us answer this question. I really love this quote. It's from a futurist, Marshall McLuhan. There's people who are actually scholars on his work. I am not. But I've always loved this quote, and it's, we shape our tools, but then our tools turn around and shape us. I mean, it's really easy when we've got a tool set that tool will define our thinking about what's possible. And so as a developer, as a person interested in this field, I'm interested in how do our tools limit our thinking and prevent us from answering that question, how do we organize a team effectively? Okay? And this is actually the question that started this whole long roller coaster. It's been the past 2 years of my life. So what is a force multiplier? This is the DoD definition. But basically, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Synergy. A force multiplier is something that when added to what we already have, our tactical assets, it's magic dust and sprinkle on it and make a combat force more effective. Okay? That's what it is. A force multiplier is a feature or capability that gives us synergy. Here's a military example. It's the AWACS, the Airborne Warning and Control System. It's this funny airplane with a little dome on top. And what it does is it gives an air battle manager, it gives them a view of the airspace. It gives them, okay, here's the missiles that are out there. Here are my assets. Here are the enemy's assets. And here's what I'm tasking to go after different objectives. Okay? This great quote, I think it's from the Indian Air Force actually, is talking about how the AWACS gave them a grand coordination of the air battle. The ability to manage it like a video game, right? Like we've all played Command and Conquer. You have, right, Josh? Yeah. You know, like that kind of ability to play general and just say, hey, smart thinking human being in this jet, go there and do what I want you to do, but I'm still going to kind of task you. That's pretty powerful, right? However, keeping with our definition of synergy and a force multiplier, let's take away those jets. Let's take away those tactical capabilities and just put this thing in the air to be your only asset. It gets shut down pretty quickly, wouldn't it? Yeah. That's something about force multipliers that it's very important. They are useless without tactical capabilities. Okay? Here's another one just outside of the military side is social media. I grew up with the internet, or I should say I watched the internet and I kind of grew up at the same time. And I've watched social media rise, and it just kind of blows me away because there's a lot of people out there who are social media gurus, experts. And they're saying, get on social media now and build a community, right? Well, no, social media is a force multiplier when you have a community. But if you don't have one, the effect is 0. 0 times a multiplier is still 0, right? And I use this example because sometimes when people see what I perceive as a force multiplier, a synergistic capability, they get really excited, like it's a silver bullet to solve all problems. And that's really dangerous because if you don't have that underlying foundation first, a multiplier is just useless. So now that we've kind of defined a force multiplier, let's take it back into the realm talking about, which is red team operations. We as a community are rich, wealthy, in intelligent people producing amazing capability to circumvent different kinds of security measures, and we do it to try to figure out how we can be attacked so we can better protect ourselves, right? And I'm interested in taking all that, all this stuff, all these tools, and how do we glue that together into something useful? So let's scope things just a little bit further. This was what my March and April looked like literally the whole 2 months. Is I spent 2 months going around like a carny, going to different events and hacking into college student computers with something called the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. I was VPN'd into the Rocky Mountain CCDC for a day. I was at Northeast CCDC, Mid-Atlantic CCDC, VPN'd into Pacific Rim CCDC. I was at something called the Information Security Talent Search, which is an offense and defense competition at RIT. It's a great event. It's been going on for 10 years now. And some other stuff, and of course, National CCDC as well. For those of you who don't know what CCDC is, it is a defense-only competition for college students. A team from the university will go to this event. They'll end up being dropped into a network that's the same as all the other schools get, and they've got to, for a weekend, keep their services up and running to achieve some sort of business objective. They have to actually respond to injected events. For example, at one event, Mid-Atlantic CCDC, they have a guy playing CEO, and he'll take the team captain in the room, and he'll chew him out. It's really hilarious to watch. He'll be like, listen, I don't care about security. I want profit. What are you doing for me, security person, to give me profit? So they do stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And, of course, they're scored on their ability to stop the red team, okay? It's really great for me because you got 10 different teams, 10 different levels of network defenders. And by the way, they get better by leaps and bounds every year. It's amazing. I have a lot of respect for the students. But it's a pretty intense event, okay? 1 hour of competition time is supposed to represent a week of real life. So I just want to give you a taste of what life looks like for us at CCDC. This is just a couple outtakes from Pacific Rim CCDC this year. And hopefully you can see this. I'll just play through it real quick. Here I'm VNCing into students' desktop they had access to, and they're trying to go to Facebook. And I'm like, dude, no Facebooking during CCDC. You're supposed to be working. Red team's everywhere. And then I was trying to tell them, type the password. I have it already. And here I'm, it's hard to see again, but I'm keylogging a guy I'm watching his desktop at the same time. He's SSHing into one of his servers and talking to somebody else on IRC on the red team. And we're just talking about this guy and kind of having a good old laugh about it. Because this is what we like to do. We like to get passwords and use them. Another one, a student writing to their judge in the competition. I started just writing stuff like, red team rules. I love red team. They are the best ever. You know, that's what I like to do. I was like, we haven't been hacked, you know, that kind of stuff. And of course, I like to send good websites, like fastandeasyhacking.com. So that's just kind of like a little bit of just what it looks like at CCDC sometimes. We have a lot of fun as the red team. But here's why I like CCDC as a laboratory for exploring these questions, okay? Anybody can say, if you give me a bigger gun, I will be more successful, right? Well, CCDC solves the tactical question. Because at CCDC, the students are running outdated systems, okay? And we're able to take today's tools, the benefit of several years of security research beyond what the students are running, and turn them around against the student networks, okay? What's great about that is in terms of a tactical situation, we have what we're going to get, right? So whether we're successful or not is going to fall on how we use what we have. Because there's probably no magical discovery that's going to come along and at least revolutionize this game, because we're playing an old game. And I like that because it lets me just say, okay, here are the questions I'm interested in, how we work together, how we organize ourselves, and the things that support us, and how can we do that most effectively. So let's go back to 2008, and let's talk about how we used this advantage, or even squandered it. First, Northeast CCDC 2008-2009, this is what it looked like. There would be student networks, okay? And we did do some clever stuff, but I'm just giving you kind of the general flow. Basically, somebody with core impact would just be getting into all the student systems, and the other people would be maybe using Metasploit and later getting into those same systems. And we would just get a lot of access until the students just started getting us patching and kicking us out. Boo. But that's what it looked like. Get into systems, got into a system. Yay, I got in, accomplished something. That was it. And here's what it looked like. Typically, CCDC events are 3 days. Some of them are 2. But on Friday, we'd get a lot of access, get into everything, sometimes multiple times, just staying there because everybody's breaking into the same systems the same way. No coordination. Saturday, by the time students had patched, we'd be getting kicked out. And we'd have to start going after the harder targets. And Sunday, we'd probably have nothing, maybe 1 or 2 systems, and we'd just delete them to kind of recover a sense of self-esteem after we'd been owned by college students. So with that, we're going to go into collaboration, and we're going to continue this story. You know what the situation looked like 2008, 2009. 2010. I'm a programmer, so I like do, right? I wrote some scripts to log into all the Unix systems right at the beginning of the event with default creds and persist in them 6 ways to Sunday. And what was really cool about that is we had access the whole weekend because we focused on persistence. And Saturday, we had one access across quite a few teams left. And it was a cron job that was phoning home, downloading a shell script, and running it as root. We could do whatever we want every hour. And so what we started doing is we're like, well, I got nothing. And everybody's like, yeah, I got nothing. Well, hey, why don't we just set up netcat listeners? And when that cron job phones home, we'll each get a shell. And every hour, on the hour, we'd get shells, and everybody'd be really happy because we're working as a team, and suddenly we're having fun. We weren't doing anything really useful, but it was kind of cool that we were working together. Because keep in mind, now this is my 3rd time with this team, and we're like, this is kind of fun. And that led me to ask, man, that is kind of fun. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a way for us to actually work together in this way all the time? What would that look like? I was really interested in that. So I set out to develop Armitage. And that's kind of where Armitage came from. That's its backstory. And I didn't know it was going to be Armitage at first. I just wanted collaboration. I actually wrote a functional spec, because I'm a geek and I do that before I write software, for an IRC bot that would allow collaboration. Because I know IRC really well. But this is what Armitage looks like for those of you who haven't seen it before. All your Metasploit modules up here, all your targets here. Everything you're doing opens up as a tab down here. And, whoops. When I built Armitage, the first version of it didn't have the collaboration. I really wanted that, but I knew it was going to take a lot longer. So, but I did sit down and said, okay, what are the needs for a red team collaborate? Well, real-time communication, the ability to actually know what we did, data sharing, meaning if Josh scans a host, I'd like the benefit of what he found, and session sharing, meaning if somebody breaks into a system, I want to be able to actually jump on that system they broke into without asking them, without action on their part. Because for collaboration to work, it has to work without friction, okay? The more a tool tries to change the way hackers work, the more resistant they are to it. So here's kind of the team concept. We stage a server, a centralized attack server, and you can have your Armitage clients connect to it, and through that attack server, you can actually work against a victim network. That's kind of the idea. And it's also nice because you can connect a client, put up that event log, shared chat room, and everybody can look up on the projector and see where you got access and what's happened so far. So it makes a great common operating picture. And what I'd like to do real quick before I just go on, just for those of you who haven't seen it, I've got Armitage right now connected to a team server, 2 different clients. And basic idea is something like this, assuming my VM doesn't need a reboot. Let me just try to exploit it. I'm going to exploit it from this client. Go over here. My teammate can be looking at their event log, and they can see that Iron Geek launched this attack, and voila, I see lightning bolts. Oh, they compromised the system. And what's kind of cool is I can open up a command shell and work with that compromised host, and at the same time, through the one connection we have to that compromised host, my teammate can do that too. Okay? So we can work together because we're kind of deconflicted. That's what the collaboration stuff looks like. So what's funny, though, about the collaboration stuff is the first thing instinctively people want to do is have one server and everybody attack, everybody do everything from it. That's really bad. What we found works is, and what's become our mantra has been decentralize attack, meaning have your attackers working on their own, and once they get access, send it to a central post-exploitation server. Remember these 2 things because I'm going to talk about why it's a big bad hack and what needs to be done to fix it in the next force multiplier. So decentralized attack, centralized post-exploitation. Here's what that looks like. Have an access team, and all they're doing is breaking into systems and sending that access back to that shared server. And on that shared server, you have people waiting in the wings saying, oh, cool, a system popped up, just like I showed you in that brief demo. And they're just doing their specific job, saying, oh, okay, I see a system popped up. I'm going to jump in and do that. The nice thing, though, is through Metasploit, you can actually do something we call pivoting, which is use a compromised host to access other hosts. Use it as a hot point. So your post-exploitation server now becomes where you're pooling all of your pivots. So now anybody on your access team can also use anything you've got pivots set up through and attack that way, too. So that's kind of been what's ended up working for us pretty well. Let me give you a little bit more context. Mid-Atlantic NECCDC 2012. This red team was led by Mubix, Rob Fuller. Did a really good job. And here's how we organized ourselves. A number of people said this was the best run red team they'd ever seen and the most smooth operating one and very effective. Rob split us up into 3 kinds of access teams. A Windows team, led by Georgia Weidman, a Linux team, led by a good buddy of mine, and a wireless access team. They were working on doing this part. We then had a shell Sherpa. That's my role. I don't have a cane, but I kind of want one and a little robe so I can herd my shells. Now, what a shell Sherpa does is, as soon as these folks get access, my job is they actually pass the access to me first. And what I do is I manage persistence, and I make sure there's a strategy to stay on those systems and maintain that access and keep it. However I do it. And I've got a number of tactical tricks I'll talk about in a later talk, but fun stuff. But what I also do as a shell Sherpa, and there's actually 2 of us, so myself and Jerry Brunel, who wrote a rootkit called the G-Spot. But what we do is we keep that persistence, and we make persistence, or we make sessions available in that shared server, okay? And that shared server actually has multiple IP addresses. So as soon as something gets blocked, well, we have quieter forms of getting back, and we just make sure access is always available. Post-exploitation team, their job, as soon as a session pops up, each person has specific roles, and they're supposed to work on them. And here's what we did at Mid-Atlantic. At Mid-Atlantic, the students were defending hospitals, okay? Went so far, Larry Pesci from Paul.com actually made these custom drug dispensers. It was really wild, like with Arduino devices that could be hacked into. And there was all this data seeded throughout the network that actually played in a simulation. So our job as a red team was to steal data and to change drugs such that we get patients killed. We actually scored ourselves on how well we killed people in the simulation. I know it's dangerous. Here's something really cool, though. Working in this way, as I've just described, post-exploitation team, the actual people doing it was 3 guys. Okay? Between the three of them, they achieved 70% of all possible flags in the simulation. So of everything we could possibly do to inflict pain across these 12 teams, which is actually a very daunting task, and especially in a chaotic environment like this, we hit 70% of it. Which means we worked really well together, and we were focusing on the objective, the goal, achieving what we were out to do, which was kill fake people. So that's why it's really important to collaborate, right? And just to add to the context, we also had a hardware team trying to figure out Larry's Arduino stuff. And we had a crack team. And they weren't like the guys who were there to make it a party, although they were pretty fun. They were actually password cracking guys. So we would take anything we discovered, like on the post-exploitation side, feed it to them. They would try to actually feed that to these other teams so they could develop more access. So that's kind of how we worked. And when we talk about automation, we're going to talk about how automation enabled us to kind of wire this together a little bit too. I'm not the only person. CCDC is not the only place this stuff's used. This is from October 2011 at a Department of Homeland Security exercise. There was a red team trying to break into a chemical plant, a fake one, defended by an active blue team. And they were using Armitage to collaborate. And here's that red team lead briefing the press off Armitage as a common operating picture. So everything I've kind of just described does get used elsewhere as well. So collaboration, the one I've spent the most time on because it's the one I understand best so far. It is a force multiplier. Why? Because it helps us make the most out of time on target, right? We might get discovered, might get booted out. We can make better use of our limited resources. Capable red team members are a limited resource. Networks can be really big, okay? It also allows us to avoid duplication of effort. Very important when you're working in someone else's network and you don't want to screw up. And of course, time on target. Also, it allows us to give roles to even our junior members. Give everybody a place to play so that we can actually grow them and bring them up, okay? And most importantly, collaboration allows us to focus on the goals of the engagement by setting up a process that works. Now, I love collaboration. I probably sold you, you're probably like, wow, that's the greatest thing ever. Cool. Well, where does collaboration fall short in the real world? Let's talk about that and talk about distribution. I mentioned before this idea of decentralized attack, right? Why do we do that? We do it because it allows the attackers free reign to work. Use whatever tools they want, be as noisy as they want or quiet as they want, whatever the vector is, without exposing our post-exploitation. Because as soon as our persistence gets caught, we're done. If our post-exploitation stuff gets caught, then in the real world, got to move to a different server for your callbacks. In an exercise, just bind more addresses, but neither here nor there. With centralizing post-exploitation, for this to truly be effective, I need access to multiple IP addresses. In an exercise, this is cake. I just do if config eth0, 1 through 128 and bind as many IP addresses in my space as I want. As a shell Sherpa, that gives me many options I can send sessions to, active control over a compromised host, and if one of them gets blocked, no big deal. I can just keep sending them to the different IP addresses. Nobody's going to block all of them. But that falls apart in the real world. First, we have a data split between attack and post-exploitation. As a pen tester, I need to make reports. I need to actually tell a story to my clients, right? It's a big pain, but it's really important. Well, if I'm working off multiple nodes, one node for attack, maybe several nodes for post-exploitation, because I'm constantly moving nodes, my data is all over the place. It's really hard to consolidate. And automatic report generating tools, useless in this context. The access to multiple seemingly random internet addresses. Again, in an exercise, really easy, real life hard. When I was pen testing, I would do a lot of spear phishing. I love spear phishing. If you look at my products, you'll know why. It works, that's why. But here's the deal. I would send out an attack, right? And my sessions would go to a system. I usually used Amazon's Elastic Computing Cloud. And every attack, and even sometimes the same one, I would have to have multiple nodes, and I would have to move nodes constantly to make sure that next attack didn't get caught, even though they were spaced out sometimes several weeks at a time. But I knew as soon as I used a node, it would be burned. Okay? That's painful from a management perspective. Armitage is going to do no good in that context. I got to connect like 10 Armitage clients to 10 nodes and manage them. That's painful, right? And the attacker, if they get access from one node, they've got to actually deal with this friction of passing a session elsewhere. So there's a lot of limitations to this concept taken into the real world. So distribution, the ability to actually manage a network of attack nodes, would alleviate these problems. So here's what I want. It's not something I've done yet, but this is the whole, what I want going forward, is I want the ability to manage not just one collaboration server, I want the ability to manage 10, 100, or 1,000 of them. Okay? And, you know, of course, botnets and things like that do this, but I want it, you know, in the tool set I use. What's painful about this is, yeah, there's engineering questions, but those are actually easier to solve. The hard part are the soft questions, which is if I've got 1,000 nodes, okay, and I've got a team working with these nodes to do a pen test, or maybe more realistically, we'll say 10, what's the right abstraction? What does that look like? What are the ways we could step on each other? For example, let's say we've got 10 nodes under our control, right? And Jeff starts scanning. And then I'm like, Jeff, dude, you just scanned from the node I was going to use for callbacks. You just blew it. What are you doing? It's all right, dude. I would have done the same thing. Is there a way that the tool set, the abstraction, can help prevent that without hindering how we work? And I don't know the answer to these questions. They're open questions. But distribution is a force multiplier because it enables all those collaboration benefits of enjoyed in an exercise environment, and it really enables all of them to come out even into the real world. Okay, so this is something I want next. Maybe a year or two from now it'll happen, but that's kind of like in the spirit of the long-term vision here, right? Now let's talk about automation. Because I mentioned that red teamers are precious. Precious. How can we actually delegate tasks to bots? What can a computer do? A computer should do what's best, right? Why would I want automation in a red teaming context? Well, hacking is tedious. I often joke that sometimes hacking feels like jiggling doorknob over and over again and being surprised when door opens. Sometimes, though, door might only be open for a certain amount of time. The window of opportunity might be really small. And, as I know, if you've ever watched me on the keyboard, you'll know why I automate everything. This is me. I actually, when people are staring at me, I start making mistakes, I make typos, and I screw things up. I get nervous. So humans are slow and make mistakes. And so what can a computer do to help aid us in what we're doing, to amplify our ability to work on a large target? Well, automation does sound cool, but there's some pains to this. First, if I'm going to have a solution to do some stuff on somebody else's network, a network I don't control, they don't necessarily know what's out there, that's kind of tough. Computers don't necessarily respond to unknowns very well, right? You know, sometimes if there's an unknown situation, program usually breaks. That's what hacking's all about, looking for the cases the programmer didn't anticipate and messing with them. So I think for automation to work, we need the ability to develop and change solutions on the fly. It's just going to be a natural reality. Okay? So, okay, great. Well, if I'm going to have like custom scripts or whatever during an engagement, there's some problems with that. One, if it was written during the engagement and it's not tested, what if it's broken? And I've got like some infinite loop doing something really crazy like deleting the wrong files. That could be scary. So I think any kind of automation solution needs positive control. The ability to say, I don't trust this thing yet. I need to be able to debug it and approve what it's doing. And then, once I trust it, let it go on its own. Okay? So humans and bots working in tandem. And of course, need the ability to start and stop these capabilities without taking down all of our collaboration stuff, because that would be painful. We need to keep our accesses where they're at. The stuff just needs to plug in and go. And also, the other challenge, too, is that our accesses, our control of these compromised hosts, might only be available through a pivot. So whatever automation solution we have needs to talk to our sessions where they're at. So with that, because this problem's been near and dear to my heart, through a DARPA Cyber Fast Track effort, I've been working on something called Cortana since November. And I'm actually releasing this at DEF CON tomorrow, and I'll be talking a lot about it, but in a different way. But you get the stories behind it, so you get the better fun. But anyways, here's the way Cortana works. I've mentioned there's this collaboration architecture. Got a team server that lets me talk to Metasploit in a safe way for multiple users, lets me access the database remotely and do all that good stuff. Well, I can extend Armitage with Cortana scripts and add new features to it, and that's fine. I'm going to talk a lot about that tomorrow. But I can actually also write bots, standalone headless bots that have a series of scripts associated with them, connect to this team server, and do the same things a human can do, hacking side by side with us in the same way that Armitage allows multiple humans to work together. That's pretty cool. Now there's a couple stories about it. Northeast CCDC 2012. Let me give you a story. New organizers this year, okay? The black team, we call them, the people who set up the network, set up the targets, didn't like red team for some reason. They kept calling it a conflict of interest if we knew anything, which bothered me because I'm like, I'm a red team guy. I'm a volunteer. I'm a facilitator. I'm not a competitor. You're supposed to give me all the advantages so I feel good about myself. Expect me to hack? What? Anyway, so Northeast CCDC 2012. Here's what happened. First, red team was immediately firewalled off from the student networks. They didn't trust us. We're trustworthy, I promise. But also, the students had all patched systems. There weren't any vulnerable systems. They told me that the XP image that they had was broken, so they just put a patched Ubuntu system in its place at the last minute. Wow. So, okay, cool. So the only way we're going to get in is default credentials, right? Right. Here's what happened. The event starts. Does that firewall come down blocking us? No. The students have an hour of lead time to change all their passwords, patch network. Now, we don't like this to be a wash, and it wasn't, trust me. But we had to work harder, that's for sure. So after about an hour, that firewall comes down, and we actually got into 2 teams with default credentials. An hour in, we were still able to PS exec into some systems. That was kind of funny. But here's what happened. We were looking for anything. We needed targets. And in the real world, it's going to be the same way, right? It's going to be a lot of patch stuff and a little bit of opportunity. So somebody was like, everybody's doing scanning. Wouldn't it be nice if there was just a way I could know what was different as soon as it was different? And I'm like, ooh, I'm building this thing for DARPA. Let me try it out. I'm like, I can write a script that will automatically, as soon as something's imported, announce something in the chat room saying, I see this IP address, this port, here's the banner. I see this IP address, this port, here's the banner. Automatically, as soon as new data is available. And I wrote that, and I wrote a bot from my system, and that bot connected to the team server. Cool. And then there was a guy who knew more about Nmap. His name's Chris. More about Nmap than I ever will in my lifetime. He's actually really fun to watch. I learned a lot from him. And Chris, he was constantly changing his IP, scanning, changing his IP, scanning. And he's like, hey, Raph, I like that announcer thing, but I'm lazy, and I don't want to import every single scan I'm doing. I'm busy enough. I'm like, okay, I agree. I'll write a bot for you. So I gave Chris a bot. He ran it. It connected to the same team server. And what the bot did is automatically imported his scan every time changed back into the system. So now we had a workflow supported by bots. On one hand, one bot announcing stuff that's changing. And that script actually is literally like 3 lines of code. And then the other bot just importing stuff. And not as relevant to this particular story, but another guy was like, hey, I got a script. It automatically exploits systems that match a certain profile. Can I have a bot that will actually, as soon as something changes that matches that profile, that it'll launch attacks from my local system? Sure. So now we have these 3 bots working with us, aiding the humans and aiding each other, just kind of feeding each other. And here's something that was really cool. Into the event, we're looking up at the screen, and up pops a host, and it's like Zimbra was in the banner. Zimbra, I hadn't heard of it at the time. What's Zimbra? Go to the website for it, and like, oh, it's a web application. It's like a collaboration suite. Oh, it just came up. They didn't change the password. Cool, we're in. The bots made that possible. Small window of opportunity, bot identified it, we were able to jump on it. Same thing again later. We see Tomcat pop up. A guy named Will, really good hacker. He's from Rapid7. He works on our services team. Will comes back and he's like, hey, there's Tomcat. I see Tomcat up on the board. Go after it, Will. Cool. They didn't change default credentials yet either. And this is how we were getting into stuff. These opportunities would come up, and then boom, we would just jump on it like rabid wolverines. And that worked really well for us. So that was pretty cool. Another example of automation. This is from Pacific Rim, CCDC, and ISTS, the Offensive Defense Competition at Rochester Institute of Technology, put on by Sparsa. Any RIT people in here? That's one. I love RIT, by the way. So good people. Anyways, here's what we did. This is later on, but there's a really great program called Windows Credential Editor. Who here has heard of Windows Credential Editor? A few of you. You have to download it. It's awesome. What it does, it's an executable. It will grab the plain text credentials of the logged in user out of memory. Pass the hash is so 2011. Pass the password is 2012, I'm telling you. So here's what we did. Running Windows Credential Editor, though, it's not in Metasploit, it's not a module. And it's a bit of work to upload Windows Credential Editor to each system, run it, get the output, copy and paste the passwords into a chat room. That's a lot of work, let's be honest. So I wrote a bot, and what it would do is every 15 minutes, it would sweep through all of our sessions, run Windows Credential Editor on all of them, parse out the username and password, and post it to our chat room. And then what became fun is like some people like at Pacific Rim CCDC are sitting on IRC and like, who keeps posting these passwords? This is awesome. Keep them coming. I'm going to keep PS execing into boxes. And that's what we were doing. So again, this is a cumbersome task that a human's not going to want to do, but it's valuable, right? And so a bot could do it. And that was feeding our team and allowing us to work. Another example from Mid-Atlantic CCDC, I don't have a slide for it, but the crack team. I mentioned the crack team, right? Coolest name in terms of red team subteams. Here's what we did. I was able to write a bot that would, hey, when I see a new credential in the database, a new hash, or a new loot show up in Metasploit's database, and those are things like captured shadow files from Linux systems, I was able to have my bot respond to that event and connect to a netcat listener that was run by the crack team. So the crack team, as soon as we discovered something new, it would automatically get fed to the crack team so they could go to town. And that's an example of these bots enabling like however we choose to organize ourselves and wiring it up so we've got a smooth process, but flexible enough so we can actually build this stuff on the fly. So automation, force multiplier. Automation's great. You know, allows us to do a lot of post-exploitation, repetitive stuff very quickly. It allows us to manage our information flow, such as sending the passwords to the crack team, announcing new opportunities like at Northeast CCDC, and handling different kinds of repetitive tasks like running WCE.exe, Windows Credential Editor against systems. And I say this, and it may sound like common sense as I describe it. I'll be honest, when I showed up with this technology at these events, I had no idea that's how it was going to get used. I really didn't. So to me, it was like, it feels like common sense now, but it just didn't hit me until I saw it. Why is this a force multiplier? It's a force multiplier because it allows our red team to scale now, okay? And actually get more out of the people we've got while delegating things to bots. So our three force multipliers: collaboration, distribution, automation. Collaboration allows us to assign meaningful roles to our red team members, right? The open question: what is the right combination of roles to organize a team? I don't know. But at least we can now ask that question and experiment with it. Distribution: it removes these limitations in the real world. This stuff all works great in exercise environment, but once we have the ability to manage and attack cloud, gotta have cloud in my talks now, it makes that really open up to some cool possibility. In automation, add automated actors to your team. But the question is, which tasks do we delegate to bots? And what is the right means of positive control? Still an open question. It's bad enough figuring out how to make humans work together. How do I add automatic actors to it too? So let me just show you a real quick video. This is from Pacific Rim CCDC. You may see all this stuff here and that big scroll bar. Session, 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 session. A lot of compromised systems. Lots of them. That's a lot to manage really quickly when time's limited. So I had a bot, a script, and what this bot would do is as soon as a session opened up, it would automatically backdoor these systems 6 ways Sunday. And here, I'm telling the bot, show me every command you're doing so I can see it. And we had another bot bridging IRC with this team server so everybody on IRC could see what was happening too. And what was kind of cool is those commands are just scrolling really fast. No human's going to do all that fast. But it's kind of nice just to be able to kind of have this all on the fly as other people are like working together. Like you can see here, a guy who's dumping hashes while this is going on. Humans and bots working together in kind of a intense, fast-paced situation. So with that, in today's talk, I introduced the problem. We talked about force multiplier, which is synergy. We scoped it to these collegiate cyber defense competitions. We talked about collaboration, distribution, and automation as force multipliers. And the purpose of those things and building those features wasn't to answer this question. It was allow us to start experimenting with a potential answer. And that's what the work I'm doing is all about, is trying to make it so we can actually ask this question and get a meaningful answer and maybe get that book written. If you want to know more, I recommend checking out my DerbyCon talk from last year, Dirty Red Team Tricks 1. I hope there's a Dirty Red Team Tricks 2. That's fastandeasyhacking.com/dirty. Cortana, I'm releasing tomorrow at DEF CON. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Armitage Hacker. If you go to advancedpentest.com/training, I've got a 7-part free course on pen testing. But look at part 7. That's the team operations lecture. So it's more of a practical guide. And you can always email me. I do respond, rsmudge@gmail.com. With that, do I have time to take any questions? I got like 2 minutes, so I got time for a question or two. Any? Everybody's like, that was fun. All right, guys. Well, if you got anything, just come back and see me. I'll give you cards, give you comics and stickers. Thanks again.